Hello everyone and welcome to episode 10 of my Lancastrians and Yorkists vlog. We are deep in the story of Henry VI and the tussle with the Yorkists for the throne. We've reached 1455 and the first Battle of St Albans, which is really the opening shot in the Wars of the Roses. And you'll remember that last time at the Battle of St Albans, Richard of York and his allies and friends, the Neville family, the Bishop of Salisbury, and the Earl of Warwick had defeated the King's supporters and allies, and in particular the Duke of Somerset, who had been killed, along with other allies and supporters of Henry VI. Henry VI had been captured by Richard of York and taken to London. So in 1455, the Yorkists, Richard of York and his followers, his supporters, had secured themselves effectively in power by having the physical possession of the king. But it's important to know, or to note rather, that they don't threaten Henry VI's life. They are just trying at this stage to remove those advisors, those evil counsellors from around him, and to re-establish control of England in order to ensure good government as they saw it. However, crucially, in so doing, Richard of York, makes big enemies, first of all of Margaret of Anjou, Henry VI's wife and queen, probably because she thinks he is after the throne, and then also of mostly of the sons and families of those people who had been killed at St Albans. So from 1455 through the next kind of 3 years-ish, it seems like Richard of York is the dominant figure in England, but that dominance is kind of softens as you go on, and the political situation is complicated by Henry VI still being the monarch and by other lords and nobility having influence, and particularly Margaret of Anjou plotting away in the background to try and gather together an opposition party really to Richard and his allies. It has to be said again that York does a decent job as protector. He sorts out problems in the southwest, partly by arresting the Earl of Devon, who up to now had been a supporter of the Yorks. But in February 1456, he's actually removed from the position of protector, and that of course leaves him just as the most powerful lord in the Great Council. He's removed from the position of protector because Parliament didn't support his Bill of Resumption, which is, remember, when a law that resets kind of all the land back to possession of the people who'd had it at the start of a reign of a monarch. It's also fair to say that the parliaments at this time, when Richard of York was the dominant force, had been quite small, which also is a sign that not everyone is convinced by his claim to be, his claim to power, I guess, effectively. So Margaret, as I said, is building up her power base and tries to improve that by calling Parliament to meet in Coventry on several occasions. And we're not really sure kind of like how all those political shenanigans go on, but in the middle of those takes place on 1458 Love Day, which is an attempt to bring together the two sides in reconciliation. Most historians think that Henry VI is behind this just because it smacks so much of Henry VI's kind of just his kind of way of doing things, I suppose, his lifestyle. If he does, I have to say it probably is the most proactive thing he does in the whole story. Love Day was a ritualistic reconciliation whereby the two sides would walk together to St Paul's through London, literally hand in hand. So, for instance, Margaret of Anjou walks hand in hand with Richard of York to show that they were best friends, nothing to see here, and therefore, problems all solved. Also, at this time, a deal is struck whereby money is given to the Priory of St Albans so that they would say prayers for and take masses for the dead who had been killed in the Battle of St Albans. So there is kind of an attempt at that reconciliation. However, things kick off again in 1459, and we're not really sure exactly what the instigator for this is, what the trigger is for this. But it might well have been Warwick attacking ships. He's still captain of Calais, attacking French ships in the Channel without permission. So in 1459, he, Warwick, and York are summoned to court in Coventry, but they refuse to go because they fear that they're going to be arrested, that Margaret Montagu's got enough power now to strike against them. And what they do instead is gather together their forces in case they are going to be compelled or attacked. And they gather them together in Shropshire at Ludford Bridge. This is October 1459 in the so-called Battle of Ludford Bridge. Actually, what happens is that York and his allies get together. They're in a castle, and then one day there's a knock on the door, and the fog kind of lifts outside, and they notice that not only is there quite a big army out there opposing them, but also that the banner of the king is with them, which is a bit of a surprise for some of the people in their camp who had been told by York that they were just facing off against the evil counsellors of the monarch. So some of those flee away, and what happens actually is that it's quite a big defeat for the Yorkists. Richard of York legs it to Ireland. His son Edward and Warwick flee back to Calais. And in the aftermath, Margaret of Anjou is able to dominate proceedings and kind of mop up and claim a victory. This is the high point of this is in the Parliament of Devils, which met at Coventry and passed an Act of Attainder. This is kind of a sort of like a trial act, really, I suppose, or an act where you put someone on trial in their absence. It condemns the Yorkists to death, it seizes their land and their goods, and particularly punitively, it disinherits their heirs as well. The Parliament also recognised Edward as heir and took an oath to him, but it's the first bit, that Act of Attainder, which is seen as being Margaret overreaching. She's blamed for this, although it's fair to say, Parliament did back her, so she had quite a bit of support in doing it. But nevertheless, the Parliament of Devils in 1459 seems to up the ante, ratchet up tensions further, rather than striking to be an opportunity to resolve things with Richard and Warwick and Edward out of the country. So the final phase of this fight for power is between 1460 and 61. Initially, in this period, things look really good for the Yorkists. They recapture the king. And then Richard of York claims the throne for himself, which is a bit of a plot twist, before Margaret of Anjou strikes back for a second time, but then makes seemingly quite big mistakes, and that leaves the door open for the final act, which is that Edward of York, Richard's son, and Warwick, who's still around, triumph either because of their strength and competence or because of the Lancastrians' weaknesses. So let's see how that plays through. In June 1460, York's son Edward and Warwick, who were based in Calais, where Warwick was captain of Calais with quite a reasonably sized force, plan an invasion of England. Henry Beaufort, actually, Edmund Beaufort's son, the Duke of Somerset's son, had been appointed by Margaret of Anjou as the new captain of Calais, but he was literally not able to get into the town because the town was still loyal to Warwick. So Warwick's able to use the garrison from Calais and his connections generally, some piracy and his reputation to get together a force and the cash for that force. And they land in Kent, where they're supported by the locals. They move on to London, where there's great enthusiasm for them, and then defeats the Lancastrians at Northampton on the 10th of July 1460, again seizing Henry VI, just as they had in 1455 at St Albans. So they actually have physical possession of the king. Again, just as they had at St Albans in 1455, they claim that they're loyal to Henry VI and that they're only acting against evil counsellors. So this is where the Yorkists again seem to have triumphed and defeated their opposition. In September of 1460, Richard of York finally arrives on the scene. He'd been cooling his heels in Ireland until this time, and for the first time in the whole story, York then claims the throne. It's not clear whether Warwick knew about this in advance or anyone else, but certainly it seems to be quite a big deal when he arrives in London, and is definitely recorded some uneasiness about it. Anyway, the upshot of this was that Parliament actually made York protector, but also said that he was now going to be heir to the throne. So Henry VI would continue to be king under Warwick's kind of guidance, and then when Henry died, Richard of York would become king after him. This, of course, is going to enrage Margaret of Anjou because her son Edward should be the next king. This was the Act of Accord, by the way, and it has to be said that only really Yorkists in the Lords are buying into it. They're probably the only people that are turning up. At this time, Margaret was hiding in Scotland, and with her son disinherited, she gathers together a force of Scots and her allies that are left and marches south to confront Richard of York, who moves north to stop her, but with only quite a small force. And so in December 1460, he reaches Wakefield, where he stops, gets into the castle, creates a bit of a defensive zone and waits for reinforcements to come. They're probably outnumbered by 2-1. Again, we're not quite sure because the tales of this all vary in what happens. But at some point, it seems that probably York and some people with him are running low on food. They go out foraging. Their party is ambushed. York goes out to help the people that have been ambushed. And there's the battle ensues from there. The Battle of Wakefield is a disaster for the Yorkists. Richard of York himself is captured and then beheaded. And his head is stuck on the gates of York, famously wearing a paper crown to mock him for claiming the throne. His second son, Edmund of Rutland, is also killed, as was Warwick's father, Salisbury. This is the settling of scores that had been started really at St Albans. Clifford executing Rutland, Bombville is executed by Courtenay. It's just a sign of how the Wars of the Roses became quite personal between families. However, what this meant was that Margaret is now very much in the ascendancy. Richard of York is out of the way. All she has to do is mop up. And so she travels south with her army, but on the way, her army, big mistake, pillages and loots to a huge degree. Nevertheless, she gets to St Albans and defeats Warwick there. Her army, Margaret's army, is about 15,000 to Warwick's 10,000. And recaptures Henry VI as a result of winning the Second Battle of St Albans. All she has to do is to get into London and it's kind of game over. However, because of the reputation of her army, London shuts its doors to Margaret of Anjou. And again, crucially, she retreats north. And this seems to be quite a big mistake that Margaret made. First of all, in having an ill-disciplined army. Secondly, in not following through at London. And what that means is that although the job is almost done, it's not quite done. And next time we'll have a think about and a look at how the Yorkists finally triumph in 1461. For now, though, that's it. I hope that was useful, and I'll see you next time.